I wanted to frame this correctly, so I wrote it down. We interface with AI on a daily basis through social media, search engines, and many other services that are now pervasive in the internet. These forms of private infrastructure autonomously curate and serve the vast majority of knowledge the average person sees day to day. Do you think the intersection between these two trends, delegating more social responsibilities to AI and corporate entities managing this now critical infrastructure without democratic oversight, represents an inevitable threat to global democracy, despite our incredible access to it?
Thanks. That's a great question, actually. Originally, social media was used as an organizing tool for burgeoning democratic movements, for instance, the Arab Spring, right? But you're right. When you think about how democracy works, imagine the public square. This is a time before technology, before telephones, before the internet, when the way that politics was done in the early days of democracy was people would stand up on a soapbox and speak in a public square. Social media is that public square now, and it's not public, it's a private square. And the quality and type of conversation that's happening is being directed by AI algorithms. So we do need to take a strong look at that. I don't know what the answers are, but I do know that it's an area that we have to have a lot more discussion of, because it is impacting our public discussion and our public conversation and our ability to self-govern.
Before we ask the next question, there is a March for Science on Earth Day, April 22nd, here in Houston, downtown. If you Google it, you'll get the information that you want about that. I wanted to
Oh, great. Thank you for that.
Brian Henry at Kingwood High School for informing me about that.
And again, that's a nonpartisan thing. In fact, I would bring every Republican friend and family member that you can, because what we need to do, again, is to bridge all of these issues. And if you've got science-denying friends on the left that think that cell phones cause brain cancer, that GMO is unsafe to eat, all of that nonsense, drag them down too, because we just need to talk about this.
All right, next question.
So you listed out a bunch of battle plans about what journalists can do in academia, universities, and lawyers, but I'm none of those things, and I won't be any of that or a part of any of those things for at least 2 more years or so. I just am a kid in college who has a dream and an idea and wants to help people. I think that science is really important. I think that facts and objectivity is a great way to start discussions, but what can I do as an individual on a daily basis to combat that?
Great question. What can you do as an individual on a daily basis to fight the war on science? Use your creativity and your communication skill to blog about it, to post about it, to create conversations about it, and to correct people's misconceptions about it. Because this is a broad national conversation that we have to have. And ultimately, it's a communication effort that we have to have. And you are a critical part of that. There's some amazing work that's being done by organizations that are even being founded by, there's one called I Matter, founded by a 13-year-old who realized that they decided that, Washington is kind of a lost cause, and they're concerned about climate change, so there's tens of thousands of kids that are involved in this, founded by a kid with his mom. And they go to city councils and they say, would you adopt this resolution to begin to work locally on this? So it just, the same with science debate, a small group of people can have a big impact if you are passionately committed to it.
Over there, next question.
Considering the goals you listed of partnering with religious leaders and using inclusive language, I'd like to question your listing intelligent design as an alternative theory, when I think what you meant to describe as creationism, while intelligent design includes beliefs that include the scientifically supported beliefs of evolution, the Big Bang. All of these can be held consistently with intelligent design.
Well, That's not the view that is held by mainstream scientists. Intelligent design is a form of creationism. And actually that's the term that was used in the Kitzmiller v. Dover case, the famous case in Pennsylvania that was decided by a Reagan appointee Republican judge who said that, yes, this has all the same markings as creationism. And that's because it starts with a conclusion, again, and builds, which is a religiously prescribed conclusion, and tries to build an argument to support that. That's not to say that people can't have views of faith that are either contradicted by science or that that science has nothing to say on. Because ultimately, science is, like I said, it's not about determining ultimate reality. It's just about looking at what's here and now. So the idea of evolution should not pose an existential challenge to your faith or to anybody's faith, but it is a fact as far as we've been able to establish. In fact, it's the most researched area of science. The whole idea of biology is essentially, chemistry in the context of evolution. We need to honor the investments that have been made over hundreds of years now by scientists working in evolution.
Next question right here.
Yes.
Hi. So I'm a Diane, and my dad is a Jack.
Wow, okay.
So when someone's talking to somebody who just completely inundates themselves with this web, what do I say to someone like that? Because if I say, well, here's the original data, he's already decided that it's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you go with that?
When I talk to friends or family members one-on-one about that, I talk about how there's this difference between us, and I ask them, how do you feel about that, and how do you reconcile that? Knowing me and knowing the evidence that I see, how do you gauge that in your mind? And I try to challenge them that way a little bit. This is an emotional motivation that generally drives somebody into this web, and then it's supported by all this intellectual propaganda, but ultimately it's an emotional drive at its core. So the best way to battle that is the same way that you do with education. You create cognitive dissonance, you raise their level of concern, and then finally you make an emotional argument, and then at that point people can begin to take in new information. It's very, very difficult, though. I will grant you that. And it's hard to have success at it. Generally, think about cults. It takes people on average, sociologists, psychologists say, about 2 years to unwrap their mind from an immersive cult that they've been involved in. It's probably going to take somebody about 2 years to really pull their mind out of that kind of web too. So it's a big, big challenge. But I would make an emotional appeal and say about how important it is to you and how important it is to your kids or to your country.
Next question right over there.
You talk a lot about waging the war on science, but how about waging the war for science in countries like Saudi Arabia or Iran, where theocracies that genuinely go against, scientific discoveries, they go against their regimes?
Yeah, actually I write about that in the book. In fact, during the Dark Ages, it was the House of Wisdom Madrasa near Baghdad and scientists in Syria that were kind of the home of scientific knowledge. In fact, the whole idea of science, as we think about it, is attributed to Francis Bacon. This idea of objective-based science really can be traced back to a Muslim scientist named Ibn al-Haytham, who wrote a book called Optics. And Bacon read that and developed that. What happened in those countries is that there was the same kind of war on science between religious fundamentalists that said this is a challenge to our power base, and they drove those science practicing Muslims into silence or killed them or drove them out of the country. And it has set back many of those countries scientifically and technologically for hundreds of years. So they are an illustration of the dangers of that. And societies have fallen all the time when they turned away from science. That led to the fall of the Greeks. It led to the fall of the Roman Empire in a lot of ways, just like it led to the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Writing about it, talking about it, the battle is not with Islam, and it's not with Christianity, it's not or with religion in general, it's with fundamentalism that rejects knowledge. Name Boko Haram is another good example. Western knowledge is forbidden. We got to get past that.
Got 2 more questions, one right here.
So obviously there's like an issue in our education systems now. There are like misconceptions and wrong teachings. Where do you think this change needs to start for like our future generations?
Yeah, well, part of it is education school, and I read about this a lot in the book. This whole idea that that a teacher can't have any authority to present knowledge to somebody with a different cultural heritage or different socioeconomic background, and that the most that they can do is to be a guide at the side. That maybe makes you feel good, but it's demonstrably false. And we need to get back to the idea that there is objective knowledge and that we need to teach that. But the other thing that I do when I talk to teachers, because I do talk to groups of like master teachers in different places, is I talk about focus on, and it's hard, but talk about focus on the process, focus on the know-how, create cognitive dissonance. I've got a whole talk that I do about it. And break it down and make it relevant to their lives, and suddenly it becomes exciting, and it can transform a student's worldview. So these are incredibly powerful tools when teachers can adopt them. Unfortunately, a lot of teachers are really saddled with all these legislatures who demand testing and outcomes because politically it makes them look good. And there's not always a lot of room for actually teaching process these days. So that's, again, it's a political conversation that we have to have as well as a conversation in school.
Okay. This will be the last question, but of course, if you have a question, Shawn's more than willing to talk with you after we finish this. And don't forget again that his book is on sale. So final question, please.
Hi, in your book you mentioned that during the Bush campaign, the person in charge of NASA public relations didn't even graduate college, that he made that up and that would be really dangerous. Having leadership agencies and currently in the EPA, if you had a solution or if you have a method that could change the people that elected from the government rather than science communities, would you have like a solution to that or a method that could help avoid that conflict of interest in the future?
It's a great question, and no, I don't. I mean, how do you stop somebody from appointing somebody that is just completely anti-science to run a science agency, or to have, like Scott Pruitt, or to have control over the communications of a science agency? The only real solution is to get a public knowledgeable and invested enough, again, in objective knowledge to make there be an electoral penalty for politicians who go there. And right now we're not at that place, but I have confidence that we can get back there.
Shawn spent his entire day waiting to come down here at an airport, and we really appreciate it. We had over 210 people here tonight, which is, if not the largest crowd we've ever had for a talk, it's one of the largest crowds we've ever had. Thank you for coming. Let's give him a nice round of applause.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.